Alexandrians and some Antiochians were not fond of the treatment of Dioscorus of Alexandria in the Council of Chalcedon, or the way the Tome of Leo was imposed on all the churches. Indeed, some saw the council as a betrayal of Cyril of Alexandria, because it canonized the language of the two natures, which he had only conceded to for the sake of reunion, as in the formula of reunion, but he had never established it as the standard. Statements in the Tome of Leo, such as, "The one of these shines out in miracles," referring to the divine nature, "The other succumbs to injuries," referring to the human nature, seemed to be betraying the line of thinking of Cyril, where all attributes and activities are to be attributed to the person rather than the individual natures. In other words, only one person, namely Christ, can be born, suffer, or perform a miracle, rather than ascribing hunger, thirst, and suffering to the human nature as an isolated nature from the divinity, which in that case would only perform miracles. Consequently, the divinity wouldn't be in full unity with the humanity. The Tome of Leo sounded both ambiguous and unfit to be the standard of faith due to its usage of the Latin term such as persona, which could be translated to mean prosopon in reference to the unity between the divinity and humanity rather than the hypostatic union. The unity of the divine and human natures at the level of the persona implied external realities becoming united, as opposed to hypostatic union or natural unity, which is a more of an internal union. In other words, Cyril was inclined to emphasize the union of the divine nature and human nature in one composite nature, to affirm the reality of the union being natural, that is, hypostatic and internal. The Latin reading of the Tome of Leo, however, could imply the unity to be between a divine and a human person, thus rendering the unity to be a mere conjunction, that is, prosopic and external. This implication raised skepticism on the side of a number of the attending bishops, including those who subscribed to Chalcedon and those who rejected it. These factors, together with the political elements of deposing Dioscorus of Alexandria, for example, without deposing Juvenal of Jerusalem, who had attended with Dioscorus the Second Council of Ephesus in 449 AD, and the readmission of Ebas of Edessa and Theodoret of Cyrus, was seen by the anti-Chalcedonians negatively, and one that is leaning towards the teaching of Nestorius. This caused a violent schism between the Chalcedonians and anti-Chalcedonians. The Chalcedonians accused the anti-Chalcedonians of being Monophysites or Eutychians, who were those that adopted the single nature form of Christology, where Christ's humanity was engulfed by the divinity to form a single nature. The anti-Chalcedonians accused the Chalcedonians of being Nestorian, viewing them as ones who believed in two separate natures in Christ. This caused riots and mobs to cause disturbance within Alexandria and Antioch. A lot of blood was shed to the extent that 10,000 anti-Chalcedonian Christians in Alexandria were killed at one time for choosing their own patriarch rather than succumbing to the imperially appointed Chalcedonian patriarch. The anti-Chalcedonians have also been accused of murdering one of the Chalcedonian patriarchs, who acted as both patriarch and prefect or governor simultaneously. His attempts to subdue anti-Chalcedonians were seen as attempts of colonization under the veil of accepting the council. The schism in the East was treated by the Henoticon, a formula of faith coined by Emperor Zeno, in 481 AD, the emperor that was Christologically satisfactory to both sides, inasmuch as the Henoticon clarified that both sides had the same faith regarding Christ. However, its omission of anything related to Chalcedon was infuriating for the Church of Rome. Thus, Rome impeached communion with all the bishops of the East, who signed the document as it was seen as a betrayal of the perfection of Chalcedon. This schism came to be known as the ACACIan schism after ACACIUS, Bishop of Constantinople, who accepted the Henoticon despite Felix of Rome not accepting it. Alexandrians were no less suspicious of Chalcedon and the Henoticon and wished that Chalcedon may be fully omitted from church history. Anti-Chalcedonian masses were suspicious of their own patriarchs and bishops who would sign the Henoticon. In a way, the schism persisted because of the fundamentalism of anti-Chalcedonians in Alexandria and the fundamentalism of Chalcedonians in Rome. The former party saw Chalcedon in a purely negative light, whereas the latter perceived Chalcedon's authority to be authoritative and unquestionable. Eventually, the reunion of the Henoticon would ultimately fail, and the schism would persist after Zeno died in 491 AD.